1 Chapter 0. Death's Only the Beginning. You are listening at FameTV.info. In a room filled with darkness, a man sits there calmly looking at the void. His eyes don't show any type of emotion, but he knows that he was dead, but the thoughts that were in his mind were only about the curiosity of what it's about to happen to him. The man looks like doesn't have any concern about his death. The man's name is Emil Ragnell, a 47 years old man, the most famous criminal on Earth, at the year 2042. His ode of crimes begins when he was 5 years old. Precisely the moment he was born or when his memories begin. He was fished in a night with a red moon by fishermen in Japan. In his possessions was only a fragment of his memories, his name, with black hair that makes the darkness of the night pale before him, red eyes that make any person tremble in fear, and a profound charm that makes you want to keep looking to only see a complete abysm of scarlet blood and darkness. He was taken by the police with knowing nothing about himself. He didn't understand the language they were speaking, but there wasn't a moment of fear, only curiosity about his surroundings. Like an alien in a new planet, the police treat him like an illegal immigrant at first, but after they find nothing about him, they even ask other nations about him, but about a week of search nothing was found, so the government decided to take him to an orphanage. It took him only 3 months to learn to speak Japanese, 1 more to learn to write. He understood that he wasn't normal at looking at his peers in the orphanage, they were slow at learning. What other kids took a month to learn, he does it in a day. So he decided to learn the most he can. He believed that knowledge was a power that will let him go anywhere he wants to. So times passed and he was 12 years, another lesson comes to him. In that time he was studying in a prestigious school in Tokyo, one where only the children of the richest and powerful went. He reaches there only with his wits and mind, obtaining a scholarship that covers all his expenses from food to housing. He was very popular in the school, a genius with immense charm. But cold and filled with empathy. The only moments of happiness were when he accomplished something hard or when he was reading. But even with that, there were people who come close to him. One was a girl of his class, a rich and beautiful girl. She comes close to him only by curiosity, and he talks to her by the same reason. But he didn't think that girl would change his view of the world. The friends of that girl became jealous of him. So they send a bunch of thugs to break his legs. He didn't understand why they are doing that, why they hurt other people. In his mind, life was an extremely precious thing, yet they were people that can hurt others for some immature motives. His next 3 years of school were mostly in the hospital. It took him a complete 3 years to comprehend why they can do that and what he needs to get stronger. He thought that with the knowledge he will get him stronger, but that wasn't enough. That was his mistake. He understood that he needs more than knowledge to accomplish his dreams. He needs power, mightiness that can make him a living Superman, and money enough to be able to buy a few countries. But before that, he needed to understand human nature, what drives them, the emotions, how they think. Not because they were different than him, but because humans are creatures with infinite potential. They can easily become the kindest being in the universe, and also be the evilest being that makes demons fall back in fear. So he needs to understand them and himself. So he left school and began to work. With his intelligence and abilities, it was easy to get a massive income using the stock market. Buying companies and doing business all around the world. He began to slowly amass his fortune. Money comes to him, and knowledge was coming to him in massive waves of books and experience. At the age of 22, he was one of the 100 top richest men in the world. With massive companies in his hand, worthing billions, but it wasn't enough. He lacks mightiness, he lacks power, so he began his training. Using his fortune, he found a security company called Avalon, where martial artists and mercenaries from all over the world reunite to learn and test their prowess. Many masters of martial arts that were lost to the past of times resurfaced in the walls of Avalon. Was a golden age for all these people. With the help of these thousands of masters, he began his training. Torturous training that makes any person think that he wasn't in his mind. But still with an indomitable will and heavens-defining talent, his body reached the top of humanity. When people see him, they know that he was the only living legend in the world, that he was how Hercules or Achilles looked when they lived. But not everything was good. They were attacked by a lot of companies that found his presence a nuisance. Attempts to his life was a daily thing. The police were at the side of justice, obviously by using the word justice mean justice of the powerful. With politicians attacking like piranhas when even the smallest mistake they make it a huge ordeal. His though were quite simple at the time. If I can win in the light, I will in the shadows. From that moment, dead was brought to his enemies, assassinations, terrorist attacks, any kind of means to accomplish his goals, but no one could find evidence against him, and obviously, dark moves were ineffective against Dark himself. So couldn't do anything against him, only crawl in fear. He was a legend in the light world, a famous businessman, helping the people, a kind and mighty leader. And in the dark world, he was feared and treated like a god, more than the devil himself. From every thief and thug to the mayor's criminals in the world, they look up to him like a model to follow. One must think that the world in his hand was in chaos, but no, the world was in an age where people didn't lack food, job, opportunities, anything. Technologies were flowing like spring after an ice age, massive changes that would make people 50 years ago think that it was a book of science-fi. His legend, his tale was told to every kid in the world, hoping them can grasp at least a speck of his shining. But every legend, every tale has an end. Tales there are always overdramatic ends, like betrayed by his close ones, by his country, even by the world itself. Sometimes a magic like incurable disease. Or trashed by a truck. That happens a lot. His death was less dramatic. He decides to kill himself. Yes, suicide. Simple yet unimaginable for someone with the world in his hands. But he has a reason. Everything he did in his life was only to accomplish his dream. But he wasn't able to do it. Not in this life, so he bet it. In what he bet? Well, that was in an afterlife, and he wants to go there with his memories intact. He researches every religion, for the meaning of afterlife. And in conclusion, he creates the theory of souls. He thought that every soul is a vessel itself, and the body it's only the manifestation in the material world, ruled in world laws. The soul normally was in an ethereal form that resides in the body, but that form was incomplete. To convert the soul in its final form, the soul has to be crystallized, and converted in a soul crystal, and temperate his soul to be able to store his memories in it. But to do that it needs a few tasks that normally was impossible to do in earth. The first task was to learn how to control the soul. This was the first hardest task. To accomplish it, he researches about it every type of book or private information classified to the public. And he learned that it was possible. With martial arts, precisely in the cultivation type of books. After a period of years of pondering, making tests, he was able to manipulate his soul with the use of ki. The movement of the ki was through the meridians in the body, and forcing it to gather every type of gaseous substance in his body, he was able to find the soul. Amazingly, it was divided in every part of the body in different quantities. But before beginning, he has to find a place in his body strong enough to support and contain his soul. A place where it's connected to every place in the body. He chooses his heart, the best vessel for his soul. With all the years of training his organs were in an inhumane level, his skin was hard enough to be called the best armor in the world. So obviously he was able to train his organ to be able to sustain a lot of damage. So he begins his training, better to be called cultivation. After all, he was trying to do something against heaven itself. He began gathering every speck of soul in his heart. Even for a genius like him it took him 5 years. It wasn't hard, just tedious. The heart was able to contain his soul and no let it move around his body, so be able to move to the second task, the condensation of the soul, making the soul pass from gaseous to liquid. In the years of practicing the manipulation of the soul, he learned that he was able to compress and condense the soul. So he began this task at the age of 40. Every time he was able to condense a drop of soul, his body feel like he was growing a pair of dragon wings. His body feels so much strength, and his mind much more clear. It took him 5 years to form what he called Soul's Lake, but in the process, he discovered that his body wasn't able to get any stronger anymore, that was the limit of the human body. He calculates his body is like 100 times stronger than an of a world-level athlete. But that didn't affect the next and final task. After all, he can't go back anymore, not at that point. The crystallization of the soul, to able to do it not only he needs to congeal and solidify the soul. The first step of congealing was easy, but to solidify he need a massive amount of energy, and he needs to choose one. So he took a reckless approach, a decision to copy the famous Frankenstein. Yes, lightning, and he need a massive storm. So he chooses the place with more thunders and bolts of lightning in the world, that was in Venezuela, in a place called Campos of Catatumbo, with more than 1.6 million of thunders at a year, with 140 to 160 nights of thunder at a year, and the moment he chooses was when a gargantuan storm it's going to come. His body was able to sustain some thunders, but know that much mostly he will be able to resist an hour. He knows he will die, so he needs to be able to make it before dying. There was only one chance. After a few days of preparation and farewells, he departs to Venezuela. In the middle of the storm, the sky filled with bolts of lightning, they look like if the sky filled with scars. Emile was sitting in the middle of a small island, taking a small break before dying and stepping into a place where no one has reached. Emile Ragnell M. What a beautiful scene. But what a pity I forget to bring something to drink. There wasn't even the smallest fear in his eyes, there was only yearning for what is coming, an indescribable craving for the unknown. It didn't matter if he succeeds or no, after all making the impossible, it's always filled with mistakes. But still, he craves for it, he wishes for it. He began to adjust his breath, relaxing his body, stretching his arms and legs. After a few seconds, he sits in a lotus position. Taking large breaths, he began to make his soul's lake smaller and smaller to a level where it was like a water balloon. He knew that was the moment to begin the solidification, so he began to attract the lightnings in the sky with his key, and after a few seconds a thunder falls on him, and he began to stir his soul's lake, and he began to solidify his soul. Even with the immense pain he felt, he knew that he was in the right track, because he saw in the middle of the soul's lake, a small shard of his soul was made, but he needs to completely solidify to reach the final form of the soul. So he continues to attract more lightnings to his soul. One after one, an immense pain passed through his body, but still enduring it. Every time a bolt of lightning struck his body, his soul began to shine with a holy light that illuminates his all body. After an hour his body began to fail, his eyes began to bleed, his sense already disappeared. In a few seconds he will die for sure. But still he endures with every speck of will he has. Second after second, his end was coming, but his soul was brimming with the wish to continue to live for his wish. After a moment the sky began to split, like a mighty god use his hands to divide the heavens. An array of light spanning more than 100 kilometers falls in his head. And he disappeared, as the ray of light burns him to nothing in an instant. And there why come to him, sitting in the void, looking around to gather every information to learn to what happens to him. Ding irregularity found, searching reason. Ding irregularity reach in his own a level where the world's laws has to take him away from his world. Ding searching solutions. Ding searching. Searching. Ding solution finding. You will now be sent to the main plane, where everything exists. There you will be able to accomplish everything you want. Ding asking, what do you wish so much to reach this by yourself? Ding he with a smile in his face, the answer, Emile Ragnell, an adventure. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.